Lonely billionaire paid $1 for a blind woman. But he was shocked when she said his name. A lonely billionaire steps into a tiny town charity auction and ends up paying $1 single to save a blind woman from being humiliated on stage. But the moment he touches her hand, everything stops, because she whispers his name, a name she shouldn't even know. He thinks it's a mistake, until she starts describing a past he doesn't remember, a past someone worked very hard to erase. And when she receives a terrifying message saying someone is coming for her, the billionaire realizes this wasn't a rescue. It was the beginning of a dangerous truth they were never supposed to uncover. Why does she know him? Who's hunting her? And what secret from their forgotten childhood could destroy both of their lives now? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The autumn breeze rustled through the changing leaves as Mateo Ward pulled his rental car into the gravel parking lot of the Mountain View Community Center. The modest building, with its weathered wooden siding and slightly crooked welcome sign, seemed worlds away from the gleaming corporate offices he usually inhabited. He adjusted his plain navy baseball cap lower over his eyes, double-checking that his appearance wouldn't draw attention. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lot as families and elderly couples made their way inside, chattering excitedly about the charity auction. Mateo watched them for a moment, feeling like an outsider looking in on small-town life. It was exactly why he'd chosen this remote Colorado location, a place where no one would recognize the reclusive tech billionaire who rarely appeared in public without security details and carefully managed press coverage. Inside, the community center's main room buzzed with activity. Folding tables lined the walls, displaying everything from hand-knitted scarves in autumn colors to homemade pies in recycled aluminum tins. The scent of cinnamon and apple filled the air, mixing with the mustiness of old books and vintage items also up for auction. Mateo found a spot near the back, leaning against the wall where he could observe without drawing attention. "Next up, we have Mrs. Henderson's famous apple pie," called out a cheerful, elderly woman serving as auctioneer. "Starting bid is $5. Hands shot up around the room as locals good-naturedly competed for the pie. Mateo watched as people bid what they could afford, sometimes just 50 cents more than the previous offer. These weren't the million-dollar charity galas he was used to attending. These were people who understood the value of every dollar, but still found ways to support their community. A middle-aged man in a worn suit that didn't quite fit right caught Mateo's attention. There was something off about the way he moved through the crowd, like a wolf among sheep. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes as he consulted with other organizers, pointing and directing with an authority that seemed forced. As the afternoon wore on, Mateo witnessed the small victories and disappointments of the local residents. An elderly gentleman beamed with pride when he won a set of vintage fishing lures. A young mother's face fell when the bidding for a children's bicycle went beyond her means. The sun was beginning to set, casting orange light through the dusty windows when the atmosphere in the room shifted. The man in the ill-fitting suit, who had been introduced as Trent, stepped forward with a smile that made Mateo's skin crawl. "Ladies and gentlemen," Trent announced, his voice carrying a false warmth that set off warning bells in Mateo's mind. "We have a special opportunity for you all today." He gestured to the side of the stage where a young black woman stood quietly. She was slender, with delicate features and natural hair pulled back neatly from her face. Her eyes, though beautiful, didn't focus on anything in particular, and she held herself with careful stillness that spoke of practiced spatial awareness. "This here is Mia Brooks," Trent continued, placing a hand on her shoulder in a way that made her barely perceptible flinch. "She's in need of some support funds, and I'm sure our generous community can help out." A nervous titter ran through the crowd. People shifted uncomfortably, looking at their feet or suddenly becoming very interested in their auction paddles. The woman, Mia, stood with quiet dignity, but Matteo could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped her cane just a little tighter. The silence stretched painfully. Someone coughed. Another person whispered something to their neighbor. Trent's smile grew sharper, more predatory, as he clearly enjoyed the discomfort he was creating. Matteo felt rage building in his chest. Without conscious thought, he raised his hand. $1, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the awkward silence. All heads turned toward him, but he kept his eyes fixed on Mia. He moved forward, his steps measured and deliberate as he approached the stage. Trent's smile faltered slightly as Matteo climbed the steps. "Well, sold to the gentleman in the baseball cap," Trent announced, trying to maintain his showman's persona, but Matteo ignored him completely. Instead, he gently touched Mia's elbow. "May I help you down the steps?" he asked softly, meant for her ears alone. She turned her face toward him, and something in her expression changed, a subtle shift that suggested recognition. Then she did something that stopped his heart for a moment. She leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper, and said, "Matteo." "Ward?" The shock of hearing his full name, his real name, from this stranger's lips froze him in place. The busy room, the murmuring crowd, even Trent's annoyed hovering awe, faded away as Matteo stared at the blind woman who had somehow seen right through his careful disguise. His fingers tightened slightly on her elbow, not enough to hurt, but enough to steady them both as questions exploded in his mind. Who was she? How did she know him? And most importantly, what was really going on in this small-town charity auction that had suddenly become far more complex than it appeared? In that frozen moment, as the late afternoon sun streamed through the windows and dust motes danced in the golden light, Matteo knew with absolute certainty that his life had just taken an unexpected turn. The woman beside him held secrets he needed to understand, and somehow she had recognized him when no one else could. The heavy metal door of the community center creaked as Matteo guided Mia outside. The late afternoon sun bathed the concrete in golden light, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine from the nearby mountains. He spotted a weathered wooden bench tucked against the building's brick wall, away from the dwindling crowd of auction-goers heading to their cars. "There's a bench about 10 steps ahead," Matteo said softly. "Would you like to sit?" Mia nodded, her cane sweeping in small arcs before her. As they reached the bench, she reached out with her free hand, fingers brushing the wooden surface to orient herself before settling down. Her movements were practiced and precise, speaking of years of adaptation to her condition. Matteo sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. His mind was still reeling from her recognition of him. He watched as she folded her hands in her lap, her face turned slightly toward the warmth of the sun. "How?" he finally managed to ask. "How did you know who I am?" A small smile touched Mia's lips. "Your breathing pattern," she said. "The way you walk. Some things don't change even after 20 years. She paused, her fingers absently tracing the handle of her cane. "We shared a foster home when we were children, before the fire." Matteo's breath caught in his throat. The fire. The word triggered a flash of memory. Heat, smoke, screaming. He pushed it away, as he had done countless times before. "I was 6 years old," Mia continued, her voice soft with remembrance. "You were 8. You used to breathe differently when you were nervous. Quick and shallow, like you were trying to hide it. You still do. And your footsteps. They've always had this particular rhythm, slightly faster on the right foot than the left." Matteo sat in stunned silence. These were details he'd never noticed about himself, yet she had carried them in her memory all these years. He searched his own memories, trying to pierce through the fog that shrouded his early childhood. I don't remember much from that time," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "The doctor said my mind blocked out a lot of it. Trauma response." Mia nodded, understanding. "We were only together for 8 months before the fire separated us. But those months—" She smiled again, this time with a touch of sadness. "You were kind to me. You used to describe colors to me, trying to help me understand them. Red was warm like fresh cookies, and blue was cool like swimming." A fragment of memory surfaced, sitting on a worn carpet, holding crayons, trying to explain their colors to a tiny girl with bright, unfocused eyes. The image was hazy, but the feeling it carried was clear. Warmth, connection, purpose. "What happened to you?" he asked. "After the fire." Mia's expression clouded slightly. "Different homes, different cities. The system isn't kind to disabled children." She straightened her shoulders, as if shaking off old shadows. "But that's not why I'm here today." "Why are you here?" Matteo asked, noting how her fingers tightened around her cane. She hesitated, her lips pressing together briefly before she spoke. "Someone I trusted, my former guardian. He brought me here, against my will." Her voice wavered slightly. "He said he needed to run an errand, but then he just left me with that man, Trent. I heard his car drive away." Anger flared in Matteo's chest. "He abandoned you here? It's not the first time he's done something like this." Mia said quietly. He uses people, especially those who are vulnerable. For money, usually." The sun was sinking lower, casting long shadows across the parking lot. A cool evening breeze rustled through the trees, making Mia pull her light jacket closer around her shoulders. Matteo noticed there were fewer cars now, the auction crowd having mostly dispersed. "Is anyone coming to pick you up?" he asked, already suspecting the answer. Mia shook her head. "I don't think so. Not today." Matteo stood, making his decision. "Then you shouldn't be alone." He touched her shoulder lightly. "I have a safe place where you can stay tonight. Would you trust me that far?" She tilted her head, considering. "You know," she said with a slight smile, "you still smell like cinnamon, just like when we were kids. You used to steal cinnamon cookies from the kitchen and share them with me." Another memory surfaced, sneaking treats to a small girl who always seemed to know when he was coming, no matter how quiet he tried to be. "Is that a yes?" he asked. "Yes," she said simply, rising to her feet. "I trust you, Matteo Ward." The sun was now a deep orange disk, sliding behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and purple. As they walked to his car, Matteo found himself hyper-aware of his own movements, the breathing pattern she had recognized, the subtle unevenness in his gait he'd never noticed before. The evening cool was settling in earnest now, bringing with it the crisp scent of approaching night. Matteo guided Mia to his car, opening the passenger door and helping her orient herself to the seat. As he closed the door, he glanced back at the community center, its windows now dark against the twilight sky. Somehow, in the space of one afternoon, his carefully maintained solitude had been broken by a connection to a past he'd thought long buried. As he walked around to the driver's side, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Mia's story than she'd revealed, and that her former guardian's actions were far more sinister than simple abandonment. But for now, she was safe, and that would have to be enough. Matteo's car wound smoothly along the mountain roads as daylight faded into dusk. The purple sky stretched endlessly above them, wisps of clouds catching the last rays of sun. Inside the vehicle, the soft hum of the engine and gentle whir of the heating system created a cocoon of warmth against the growing chill outside. He glanced occasionally at Mia, who sat quietly in the passenger seat, her fingers running over her phone's screen. The accessibility reader's mechanical voice provided periodic updates about their location, helping her track their journey. Her other hand remained tightly clasped in her lap, betraying her nervousness despite her composed expression. "It's about 45 minutes to my place," Matteo said, keeping his voice steady and calm. "The road gets a bit winding, but I drive it every day." Mia nodded, then tilted her head slightly. "You live up in the mountains now?" she asked. "Away from everyone?" "Yes," he admitted. "I prefer the quiet." He paused, then added, Would you tell me more about the fire? I only have fragments of memories from that time." She was silent for a long moment, her fingers stilling on her phone. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. "It was late at night. I remember waking up to the smell of smoke. Everything was chaos, people shouting, running. The smoke was so thick." Her hand moved unconsciously to her face, near her eyes. "That's what took my sight. The doctors said the heat and chemicals damaged my optic nerves beyond repair." Matteo gripped the steering wheel tighter, fighting back the sudden surge of emotions her words triggered. Hazy images flashed through his mind. Darkness, screaming, the acrid taste of smoke. "But you were there," Mia continued. "I called you Eli back then. I never knew why. Maybe I couldn't pronounce your real name properly. You would always find me when I was scared. And you'd hum this simple little tune." She hummed a few notes, a simple ascending and descending melody. The sound hit Matteo like a physical force. Something deep in his mind resonated with those notes, but the memory remained frustratingly out of reach. I remember humming," he said slowly. "But it's like looking at a photograph through frosted glass. I can make out shapes, but the details—" "It's okay," Mia assured him. "You were only 9 years old. Trauma affects everyone differently." The car continued its ascent as they talked, the road becoming more serpentine. The purple sky deepened to indigo, and stars began to appear, bright and clear in the mountain air. After another 20 minutes, Matteo turned onto a private drive, the car's headlights cutting through the growing darkness. "We're almost there," he said, "just up ahead." The lodge came into view, its warm lights glowing welcomingly against the night. It was a substantial structure of stone and timber, designed to blend harmoniously with its natural surroundings. Motion-activated lights illuminated their path as Matteo parked in front of the main entrance. "Let me help you inside," he said, coming around to open her door. He noticed how she used her free hand to orient herself, touching the car's frame as she stood. The interior of the lodge was warm and inviting, with soft ambient lighting and the lingering scent of pine. Matteo guided Mia to the living room, where a plush leather sofa faced a stone fireplace. "Here," he said, helping her find the sofa's arm. "Make yourself comfortable. Would you like some water or tea?" "Water would be nice, thank you," Mia replied, settling onto the sofa. She pulled out her phone again, her fingers moving efficiently over the screen as she checked her messages. Matteo was in the kitchen filling a glass when he heard the mechanical voice of her phone's reader. "New message received at 8:47 p.m. Message reads, 'You shouldn't have left. He's coming for you.'" The sharp intake of breath from Mia made him hurry back to the living room. She sat rigid on the sofa, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly as they gripped her phone. Without hesitation, Matteo moved through the house, checking and securing each door. The lodge's security system was state-of-the-art, but he activated additional protocols, causing metal shutters to slide silently over the windows. Returning to the living room, he found Mia exactly as he'd left her, fear evident in every line of her body. "Mia," he said firmly, sitting beside her. "You're safe here. The house is secure, and no one can approach without my knowing about it." He gently touched her hand. "I won't let anyone hurt you." But even as he spoke the reassuring words, he could feel the tension mounting in the room, thick and heavy, like the smoke from their shared past. The message's threat hung in the air between them, an invisible spectre of danger that had followed Mia up the mountain. Golden sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Matteo's mountain lodge, casting warm patterns across the polished hardwood floors. In the guest bedroom, Mia stirred beneath soft cotton sheets, her hand reaching out to touch unfamiliar surfaces as consciousness gradually returned. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the air, grounding her in the present moment. She sat up slowly, her fingers finding the edge of the nightstand where she had carefully placed her phone and folding cane the night before. The events of the previous day came rushing back, the humiliating auction, Matteo's intervention, the threatening text message. But in the morning light, with birds chirping outside and the comforting smell of coffee in the air, those memories felt somewhat less overwhelming. Mia unfolded her cane with practiced movements and stood up, taking a moment to orient herself. She had counted the steps from the guest room to the bathroom the night before, creating a mental map of this section of the house. 15 steps to the bathroom, then 23 steps to the kitchen, with a right turn at the end of the hallway. From his position at the kitchen island, Matteo watched as Mia made her way down the hallway. Her movements were precise and confident, her cane sweeping in smooth arcs before her. He gripped his coffee mug tighter, fighting the instinct to rush forward and help. She clearly knew what she was doing, and he didn't want to undermine her independence. "Good morning," he said when she reached the kitchen. "There's coffee ready if you'd like some. The pot is on the counter to your left, about 2 feet from the edge." Mia smiled in his direction. "Coffee sounds wonderful, thank you." She moved to the counter, her hands finding the coffee pot with ease. "Do you have any mugs nearby?" "They're in the cabinet just above the coffee maker," Matteo replied, then added, "Would you like me to?" "I've got it," Mia said gently, reaching up to open the cabinet. Her fingers traced the edges of the mugs before selecting one. With careful precision, she poured herself a cup of coffee, using her finger at the mug's rim to gauge the liquid level. They settled at the kitchen island, the morning sun warming their shoulders through the windows. Matteo had prepared a simple breakfast of toast, scrambled eggs, and fresh fruit. He described the location of each item on Mia's plate using clock positions, something he noticed she appreciated. As they ate, Mia began to share more of her story. "After I aged out of the system at 18, things were difficult," she said, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. "There were some programs for blind adults, but the waiting lists were long. I stayed in a few shelters, worked some part-time jobs where I could." She paused, taking a sip of coffee before continuing. "That's when Marcus, my former guardian, found me. He seemed so kind at first, offering me a place to stay, helping me apply for benefits. But gradually, things changed. He took control of my bank accounts, saying he was protecting me. He kept my disability payments, gave me an allowance like I was a child. When I tried to leave..." She shook her head. "He always had a way of making me feel helpless, dependent." Matteo's jaw clenched as he listened. The protective instinct that had sparked yesterday grew stronger with each word. Without comment, he pulled out his phone and stepped into his home office, closing the door softly behind him. His private investigator answered on the second ring. "I need a complete background check on someone," Matteo said without preamble. "Marcus, last name unknown for now, operating in this area, likely involved in guardianship schemes targeting vulnerable adults." He provided what additional details he could, ending with, "This is priority. I want everything you can find on this guy." When he returned to the kitchen, Mia was rinsing her dishes in the sink, her movements sure and practiced. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I like to pull my weight," she replied with a small smile. "Besides, I'm actually a pretty good cook. Would you let me make dinner tonight? It might help me feel more normal after everything that's happened." Throughout the day, Matteo worked remotely while Mia explored the house, building a more detailed mental map of her surroundings. By late afternoon, she had insisted on starting dinner preparations, despite his protests that she was a guest. Matteo found himself fascinated as he watched her work in the kitchen. She moved with confidence, her fingers identifying spices by touch, measuring ingredients with special tools she found in her purse. The way she handled knives was particularly impressive, her cuts precise and practiced, with safety techniques clearly honed over years of experience. "My orientation and mobility instructor would be proud," she commented, hearing his surprised intake of breath as she perfectly diced an onion. "She taught me that being blind doesn't mean being helpless. It just means finding different ways to do things." As evening approached, they sat down at Matteo's large wooden dining table. The meal Mia had prepared, a fragrant chicken dish with herbs and roasted vegetables, filled the air with mouth-watering aromas. The table settings were simple but elegant, each item placed with care. A comfortable silence settled between them as they began to eat, broken only by Matteo's genuine compliments about the food. The threatening situations that had brought them together still loomed, but in this moment, sharing a home-cooked meal in the peaceful mountain evening, both felt a gentle spark of hope. For Mia, it was the hope of finally breaking free from her controlling guardian. For Matteo, it was the hope of helping someone who, like him, had survived a difficult past. The soft clink of silverware against plates filled the comfortable quiet, and through the windows, the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. In this peaceful moment, the large dining room felt less like a space in a wealthy man's lodge and more like a true home, warmed by shared food and unspoken understanding. The evening shadows lengthened across Matteo's mountain lodge as he and Mia finished their meal. The peaceful moment was interrupted by the sound of tires crunching on gravel, followed by confident footsteps on the front porch. A familiar knock echoed through the house. "Matteo, are you in there?" called a warm, maternal voice. Matteo's eyes widened in recognition. "That's my Aunt Lorraine," he explained to Mia, rising from his chair. "I completely forgot about our weekly dinner." He opened the front door to find his aunt standing there, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, holding a covered casserole dish. She wore a colourful cardigan and comfortable slacks, her expression a mix of concern and mild reproach. "Young man, I was worried when you didn't show up or call," Lorraine said, stepping inside. "I thought I'd better check on you and bring your favourite chicken and rice." Her voice trailed off as she noticed Mia sitting at the dining table. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." "Aunt Lorraine, this is Mia Brooks," Matteo said, taking the casserole dish from her hands. "Mia, this is my Aunt Lorraine Ward." Mia turned her head toward the sound of their voices, offering a shy smile. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Ward." "Please call me Lorraine, sweetheart," she replied, her tone softening as she noticed Mia's unseeing gaze. She settled into a chair at the table, her welcoming presence filling the room. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all," Mia assured her. "We just finished dinner." "Which smells wonderful," Lorraine commented, noting the empty plates. "Did you cook this, Matteo?" "Actually, Mia did," he answered, pride evident in his voice. "She's an amazing cook." Lorraine's eyes crinkled warmly. "That's wonderful. Not many young people these days take the time to learn proper cooking." She paused, her expression growing gentler. Would you mind telling me how you two met? I've never known my nephew to be particularly social. Over the next hour, as Matteo put away leftovers and made coffee, they shared the story of the previous day's events. Lorraine listened intently, her face showing a range of emotions: shock at the auction incident, anger at Mia's former guardian's behavior, and growing concern for both young people's safety. Land sakes, Lorraine exclaimed, reaching across the table to pat Mia's hand. You poor child! What that man did to you, controlling your money, isolating you, that's abuse, plain and simple. Mia's fingers trembled slightly under Lorraine's touch. I know that now, but at the time, he made everything so confusing, made me doubt myself. That's what abusers do, Lorraine said firmly. But you're safe now. Matteo did exactly the right thing bringing you here. She turned to her nephew, her eyes fierce with protective determination. And you, young man, you keep following those good instincts of yours. This girl needs help, and the Lord put you in that auction house for a reason. Matteo nodded, touched by his aunt's immediate acceptance and support. I've already got my investigator looking into her guardian's background. Good, Lorraine approved. And Mia, you're welcome to stay here as long as you need. I raised this boy after his parents passed, and I taught him to help those in need. Her voice softened. Sometimes the family we choose is just as important as the family we're born with. When Lorraine finally prepared to leave, she hugged them both, holding Mia a little longer. I'll be back tomorrow with some of my clothes that might fit you, dear, and don't hesitate to call me if you need anything, day or night. After Lorraine's departure, a comfortable silence settled over the lodge. Mia insisted on helping with the dishes, and Matteo found himself enjoying the simple domesticity of working together in the kitchen. He washed while she dried, her movements careful but confident as she found the proper places for each item. As they worked, Mia began to hum softly, a simple, gentle melody that floated through the kitchen. Matteo's hands stilled in the soapy water, a strange sensation washing over him. The tune seemed to unlock something in his mind, a hazy memory pushing through years of careful forgetting. Smoke, heat, a little girl crying in a dark hallway. His own voice, younger and frightened, humming this same melody to comfort her as they huddled together, waiting for help. The coffee mug he was holding slipped from his fingers, splashing back into the sink. His heart pounded against his ribs as fragments of memory assaulted him. The acrid smell of smoke, the sound of sirens, a child's hand clutching his own. Matteo! Mia's concerned voice broke through his daze. Are you okay? I need some air, he managed, his voice rough. Excuse me for a minute. He stumbled out onto the back deck, the cool mountain air hitting his lungs in sharp bursts. Above him, the night sky stretched vast and clear, stars scattered like diamonds across black velvet. He gripped the wooden railing, trying to steady himself as long-buried memories threatened to overwhelm him. That lullaby. He hadn't heard it in over 15 years, not since the night of the fire at the foster home. The night he'd tried so hard to forget. But Mia's gentle humming had brought it all rushing back, along with a staggering realization. The little girl he'd comforted that night, the one who'd called him Eli, because she couldn't pronounce his full name. He stared up at the stars, his thoughts whirling like autumn leaves in a storm. The past he'd worked so hard to leave behind was suddenly, inexplicably, standing in his kitchen, humming a forgotten lullaby. And somewhere out there, a dangerous man was looking for her, threatening the fragile peace they'd both fought so hard to find. The early morning frost sparkled like tiny diamonds across the pine needles, catching the first rays of dawn. The mountain air held that special crispness that only comes with autumn mornings, sharp and clean in the lungs. Matteo's boots crunched along the trail as he made his way back to the lodge after his morning hike, his thoughts still tangled with memories from the night before. He'd needed that walk to clear his head, to process the flood of emotions that had overwhelmed him. The familiar routine of hiking helped settle his racing mind, each step bringing a little more clarity. As he approached the lodge, the sight that greeted him made him pause mid-stride. Mia stood on the back deck, her hands lightly trailing along the wooden railing as she explored her surroundings. The rising sun caught her profile, highlighting the peaceful expression on her face as she tilted it toward the warmth. Her fingers moved deliberately, creating a mental map of her space, occasionally pausing to trace the grain of the wood or find a corner post. "Good morning," she called out, surprising him. "I can hear your footsteps on the gravel." Matteo smiled, climbing the deck stairs. "Your hearing is incredible. How long have you been out here?" "Since sunrise, I think. Your coffee maker has a timer. The smell woke me up." She turned toward his voice, wrapping her sweater tighter against the morning chill. "This deck is beautiful. I can feel how solid the wood is, how carefully it was built." "My grandfather built it himself," Matteo said, moving to stand beside her. "He always said anything worth doing was worth doing right." A comfortable silence settled between them as they both soaked in the morning sunshine. Finally, Matteo took a deep breath. "Mia, about last night, that lullaby you were humming. You remembered something, didn't you?" Her voice was gentle, encouraging. He nodded, then remembered she couldn't see it. "Yes, it was like a key unlocking a door I didn't even know was there. I remembered the fire, being in that hallway with you. You used to call me Eli because I couldn't pronounce Matteo properly." She finished, a soft smile playing across her lips. "I was only 5 years old. You were my hero that night, you know. You stayed with me, kept me calm until the firefighters found us." "I wish I could remember more," he admitted. "It's still mostly fragments, like looking at an old photograph through foggy glass." "The memories will come back when they're ready," Mia assured him. "Trauma has its own timeline. The fact that you're remembering anything at all is—" Her voice caught slightly. "It means a lot to me." The moment was interrupted by Matteo's phone buzzing in his pocket. Checking the display, he saw it was his private investigator. "I need to take this," he said apologetically. Stepping a few feet away, he answered the call. "What did you find?" The investigator's voice was grim. "Nothing good, Mr. Ward. Your instincts about Mia's former guardian were right on the money. I've uncovered a pattern going back at least 10 years. He targets vulnerable adults, particularly those with disabilities, gains legal control over their finances, and basically bleeds them dry." Matteo's jaw tightened. "Has he been charged?" "That's the thing. He's careful. Stays just inside the legal lines, makes everything look above board. But here's what's concerning. He cleared out his apartment last night. Neighbors saw him loading up a van around midnight. He's in the wind. Any idea where he might have gone?" "Not yet, but I'm following leads. One more thing, he's got a history of not letting go easily. When previous victims have tried to break free, he's gotten aggressive." Matteo thanked him and ended the call, his mind already racing through security measures they might need to take. Turning back to Mia, he found her still standing at the railing, but her posture had tensed. "You heard?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her fingers gripping the wooden railing more tightly. "My hearing, remember? Not all of it, but enough." Her voice wavered slightly before she steadied it. "He's gone, isn't he? And you think he might come after me?" Matteo moved closer, wanting to offer comfort but careful not to crowd her. "We don't know that for certain, but yes, he's disappeared, and given his history, we need to be careful." Mia's shoulders slumped. "I'm so sorry, Matteo. I never meant to bring trouble to your doorstep. Maybe I should go, find somewhere else." "Stop right there," Matteo said firmly but kindly. You're not going anywhere, and you're definitely not a burden. We're in this together now. But why? She asked, turning toward him. You barely know me. You've already done so much. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. Because somewhere deep in my memories, there's a scared little boy who promised to protect a brave little girl. And because you deserve to be safe, Mia. You deserve to live your life without fear. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away. I'm not used to people being kind without wanting something in return. Well, get used to it, he said, his voice warming. Now, how about we go inside and have some of that coffee you mentioned? It's getting chilly out here. Together they walked back into the lodge, Mia's hand light on his arm as he guided her through the door. The morning sun streamed through the windows, filling the space with golden light, and for the first time in days, Mia felt truly safe. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she wasn't facing them alone anymore. The coffee maker burbled cheerfully as Matteo poured them each a cup, the rich aroma filling the kitchen. As they settled at the breakfast bar, the warmth of the morning sun on their backs and the comfort of each other's presence seemed to create a bubble of peace around them, a moment of calm before whatever storm might be approaching. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through Matteo's home office as he adjusted his laptop's camera angle. Beside him, Mia sat with her hands folded in her lap, her expression a mixture of nervousness and hope. The video call connected with a gentle chime, and two faces appeared on screen: Sarah Chen, a disability rights advocate, and James Turner, a civil rights attorney. Thank you both for meeting with us on such short notice, Matteo began, his voice warm but professional. This is Mia Brooks, and we're hoping you can help us understand her legal options. Of course, Sarah replied, her tone compassionate. Mia, would you feel comfortable telling us about your experience in the foster system, particularly around the time of the fire? Mia nodded, her fingers unconsciously twisting together. I was 5 years old when the fire happened. It was night time, and I remember waking up to smoke. She paused, taking a deep breath. The doctors said the smoke damage and heat severely injured my optic nerves. I lost my sight completely. James typed quickly on his keyboard. I found the incident report from that night. The investigation revealed that the smoke detectors had dead batteries, and several fire exits were blocked with furniture. That's textbook negligence. What exactly does that mean? Mia asked, leaning forward slightly. Sarah explained gently. It means the foster home operators failed in their legal duty to maintain basic safety standards. In cases like yours, there are often substantial settlements available to compensate victims for their injuries and ongoing care needs. But, Mia's voice wavered, nobody ever told me about this. My guardian said I was lucky to receive any assistance at all. James's voice hardened. That's extremely concerning. As a minor who suffered a life-altering injury due to negligence, you should have had a court-appointed advocate managing any settlement on your behalf until you turned 18. Matteo watched as understanding dawned on Mia's face. My guardian? He took control of my finances right after I aged out of the system. He always said he was protecting my interests, but he may have been trying to access settlement money that was rightfully yours. Sarah finished quietly. We'll need to do some investigating, but there's a good chance there are funds being held in trust that you were never informed about. They spent the next hour discussing legal strategies and next steps. When the call ended, Mia sat in silence for several long moments, processing everything she'd learned. Are you okay? Matteo asked softly. I just keep thinking about all the times he told me I was a burden, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps he gave me. Her voice was barely above a whisper. All while he might have been hiding money that was meant to help me build an independent life. Matteo's heart ached at the pain in her voice. How about we get out of here for a while? Some fresh air might help clear your head, and we need to pick up a few things anyway." The suggestion brought a small smile to Mia's face. "That actually sounds perfect." They drove into town with the windows cracked, letting in the crisp mountain air. Matteo parked on a quiet street lined with small shops, then walked around to help Mia out of the car. She unfolded her white cane with practiced movements, and they began walking together down the sidewalk. "There's a bench about 20 feet ahead," Matteo narrated softly. "Then the sidewalk curves slightly to the right." Mia moved with growing confidence, her cane sweeping in smooth arcs as she listened to both Matteo's voice and the subtle sounds around her. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, distant conversation from other pedestrians. They stopped at a small drugstore for toiletries, then a clothing shop where Mia selected a few basic items, her fingers running carefully over different fabrics to determine their texture and weight. Throughout their shopping, Matteo noticed how she grew more relaxed, more willing to ask for what she needed, instead of trying to make herself as unobtrusive as possible. As dusk began to settle over the mountains, painting the sky in deep purples and blues, they picked up Chinese takeout from a small family restaurant. The smell of ginger and garlic filled the car on their drive back to the lodge, making both their stomachs growl in anticipation. Over dinner at the kitchen island, they fell into easy conversation, the heavy weight of the afternoon's revelations temporarily lifted by good food and comfortable company. "This is the best sweet and sour chicken I've ever had," Mia declared, expertly wielding her chopsticks. "How did you find this place?" "Aunt Lorraine's recommendation," Matteo answered, smiling at her obvious enjoyment. "She knows every good restaurant within 50 miles. She seems wonderful," Mia said softly. "The way she just accepted me. No questions asked. It reminded me of how you were when we were kids." They finished their meal-sharing stories about Aunt Lorraine's legendary cooking disasters and her equally legendary heart of gold. When Mia tried to help clean up, Matteo gently insisted she let him handle it. "You've had an emotionally exhausting day," he said. "Why don't I help you to your room so you can rest?" They walked down the hallway together, Mia's hand resting lightly on his arm. At her door they paused, and something in the air seemed to shift, a moment of connection that felt both new and familiar at the same time. "Thank you," Mia said quietly, "for everything today, for believing in me enough to help me fight back." "You're the one doing all the hard work," Matteo replied, his voice gentle. "I'm just honored to walk beside you while you do it." She smiled, her face tilted slightly up toward his voice, and for a moment they both felt the weight of their shared past and the possibility of their future. Then Mia squeezed his arm once before letting go, turning to find the door frame with practiced ease. "Good night, Matteo." "Good night, Mia. Sleep well." The soft patter of rain against the windows created a gentle rhythm throughout Matteo's mountain lodge. Grey clouds hung low over the peaks, wrapping the house in a cocoon of misty solitude. Mia made her way carefully down the hallway, one hand trailing along the wall, following the sound of rustling paper coming from the living room. "Matteo?" she called softly. He looked up from where he sat on the leather couch, surrounded by manila folders and loose papers. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on a photograph in his trembling hands. "I'm here," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "My investigator sent over some files overnight about the foster home." Mia moved toward his voice, her steps careful but sure. When she reached the couch, he guided her to sit beside him, the leather creaking softly beneath her weight. "There are pictures," he said, swallowing hard. "Documents, records. We were there together, Mia, just like you said." He stared at the photo in his hands. a group shot of foster children on worn front porch steps. In it, a young boy with serious eyes had his arm protectively around a small black girl with bright beads in her hair. "Tell me," Mia whispered, her fingers finding his arm. "Tell me what you see." "It's all of us on the front steps. You're wearing a yellow dress with butterflies on it. Your hair—" His voice caught. "Your hair has those rainbow beads you loved so much. You used to count them every night before bed, remember?" Mia's breath hitched. 24 beads. I never went to sleep without counting them all." The rain drummed steadily against the windows as Matteo continued looking through the photographs. Each image triggered another memory, another piece of their shared past clicking into place. "There's one of us in the backyard," he said, his voice growing stronger. "You're holding my hand while we walk through Mrs. Davidson's vegetable garden. You loved the way the tomato plants smelled. You used to let me pick the cherry tomatoes." Mia said softly, "You'd guide my hands to the ripe ones." Suddenly, Matteo's hands began to shake more violently. He set down the stack of photos, memories washing over him like a tidal wave. "The fire," he breathed. "I remember the fire now. The smoke was so thick. You were scared. You started humming that lullaby." Mia finished. "To help me stay calm while we tried to find a way out. I promised." Matteo's voice broke. "I promised I'd come back for you, but they separated us after the hospital. They told me you'd been placed with another family, and then I buried it all, everything. I'm so sorry, Mia." Mia reached out, her hands finding his face with gentle precision. Her thumbs brushed away tears he hadn't realized were falling. "You're here now," she whispered. "After all these years, you're here now." They sat in emotional silence for several long moments, the rain creating a soothing backdrop to their reunion. Finally, Matteo covered her hands with his own, holding them against his cheeks. "I remember your laugh," he said softly. "You had the most incredible laugh. It would start quiet, like you were trying to hold it in, and then just bubble over until everyone around you was laughing too." A smile broke through Mia's tears. "And you were always trying to make me laugh, telling silly jokes, making up ridiculous stories." Someone had to balance out how serious I usually was. Matteo chuckled wetly. As the morning deepened into afternoon, they remained on the couch, sharing memories that had long been locked away. Matteo got up only to make them tea and turn on some music, old gospel songs that reminded them both of Sunday mornings at the foster home. Mrs. Davidson always had gospel playing in the kitchen. Mia remembered, swaying slightly to the familiar rhythms, while she made those huge pancake breakfasts. "Speaking of food," Matteo said, "are you hungry? We could cook something together." Mia's face lit up. "Can we try to recreate her famous mac and cheese? I remember some of the ingredients." They moved to the kitchen, where Matteo gathered supplies, while Mia directed him based on her memories of the recipe. The kitchen filled with the sounds of their cooperation, whisks against bowls, the sizzle of melting butter, quiet laughter when things didn't go quite right. "A little more pepper," Mia instructed, her head tilted as she listened to the bubbling cheese sauce. Mrs. Davidson always said the secret was in the pepper. As evening approached, they had created not only a passable recreation of their foster mother's mac and cheese, but also a warm apple crisp that filled the house with cinnamon and memories. The rain continued its gentle symphony against the windows as Matteo lit a fire in the living room fireplace. "Hot cocoa?" he offered, already knowing Mia's answer would be yes. They settled on the thick rug in front of the fire, mugs of cocoa warming their hands. The crackle of burning wood mixed with the soft gospel music still playing in the background, creating a pocket of peace in the gathering darkness. "I never thought I'd have this again," Mia said quietly. "This feeling of belonging, of being safe. You'll always have it now, Matteo promised, his voice firm. We found each other again, and this time I'm not letting go. The fire cast dancing shadows on the walls as they sat together, two lost children finally found, their bond not broken by time but made stronger through its recovery. Outside, the rain continued its gentle song, as if nature itself was celebrating their reunion. The morning dawned bright and clear, with sunlight piercing through the dissipating clouds like golden arrows. Droplets from yesterday's rain still clung to the pine needles outside, sparkling like tiny prisms in the early light. Inside the lodge, Matteo found himself awake before his usual time, filled with an unfamiliar lightness that made him want to sing. He padded quietly to the kitchen in his sock feet, careful not to wake Mia as he began pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. The melody of the old lullaby rose naturally to his lips as he worked, and he hummed it softly while cracking eggs into a bowl. The tune felt different now, no longer a haunting fragment of memory, but something whole and healing. That's exactly how it goes. Mia's voice came from the hallway, warm with approval. She stood in the doorway, already dressed, her cane tapping gently against the hardwood floor as she oriented herself. "Good morning," Matteo said, smiling. "I hope I didn't wake you with my amateur concert." "Best alarm clock I've had in years," she replied, making her way carefully toward the kitchen island. "What's for breakfast?" "I thought we could make French toast," he said, watching as her hands found the edge of the counter. "Would you like to help?" "I'd love to." Mia's fingers traced along the counter until they found the loaf of bread. "I'll slice while you mix." They worked in comfortable synchronization, Mia's practiced hands cutting even slices of bread, while Matteo whisked eggs with milk, cinnamon, and vanilla. The kitchen filled with morning warmth and the sweet scent of their brewing coffee. Matteo continued humming as they cooked, and occasionally Mia would join in, their voices blending in the quiet kitchen. "The bread's ready to soak," she announced, arranging the slices on a plate. "Perfect timing." Matteo guided her hand to the bowl of egg mixture. "Would you like to do the honors?" Their shoulders brushed as they worked side by side at the counter, dipping bread and transferring pieces to the heated griddle. The comfortable silence was punctuated by the sizzle of cooking and their continued humming of the shared lullaby. Just as they were settling at the table with plates of golden brown French toast dusted with powdered sugar, Matteo's phone buzzed sharply against the wooden surface. He checked the screen, recognizing his investigator's number. "I should take this," he said, touching Mia's hand briefly before standing. "Go ahead and start eating while it's warm." He stepped into the adjacent room, but Mia could still hear the low murmur of his voice. The tone shifted quickly from casual to concerned, and she found herself setting down her fork, attention focused on the change in his breathing pattern. When Matteo returned to the table, his footsteps were heavier, more deliberate. "Mia," he said gently, sitting down beside her rather than across the table. "The investigator found your guardian's car." She gripped the edge of the table. "Where?" "Abandoned at a rest stop off the old highway." He covered her hand with his. "But that's not all. The police found some troubling items in the car, multiple cell phones, fake IDs, and documents with your information on them. They think he might have been working with others, possibly part of a larger scheme targeting vulnerable adults." Mia's fingers trembled beneath his. "How many others are looking for me?" "They're not sure yet, but we need to contact the authorities today. Make this official." He squeezed her hand. "I won't let anyone hurt you, Mia. We're going to do this right, get you proper protection." She nodded slowly, her breakfast forgotten. "What do we need to do?" I'll spend the afternoon gathering all the documentation we have, the foster care records, the fire report, everything the investigator found about your guardian's history. Would you be okay with packing a bag, just in case we need to move quickly? Yes, she said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. I don't have much anyway. They spent the day in purposeful motion. Matteo made calls to his lawyers and the authorities, his voice a constant reassuring presence in his home office. Mia packed her few belongings with careful precision, each item placed deliberately in her small bag, her fingers checking and double-checking the contents. The sun was still high when they decided to have an early dinner, neither of them having eaten much since breakfast. Matteo prepared a simple meal of soup and sandwiches, comfort food for uncomfortable times. Everything's in place, he told her as they ate. We have a meeting with the police tomorrow morning, and my lawyers will be there to protect your interests. Mia nodded, her spoon moving slowly through her soup. Thank you, Matteo, for everything. As night began to fall, they gravitated to the living room, neither wanting to be alone. They sat close together on the sofa, the warmth of their shoulders touching, providing silent comfort. The room grew darker around them, but neither moved to turn on the lights, finding solace in the quiet shadows and each other's presence. Remember when we used to sit like this? Mia asked softly. In the window seat at Mrs. Davidson's during thunderstorms. You'd count the seconds between lightning and thunder. Matteo replied, his voice gentle in the darkness. And I'd tell you when the storm was moving away. They sat together in the growing darkness, their shared memories a buffer against the uncertainty ahead. Despite the worries of the day, there was a fragile hope in their closeness, a sense that whatever came next, they would face it together. The pre-dawn hours wrapped the mountain lodge in deep silence, broken only by the soft whisper of wind through pine needles. Mia lay awake in her bed, her heightened senses picking up something that felt wrong in the quiet house. The air seemed different somehow, heavier, charged with an unseen tension that made her skin prickle. A floorboard creaked somewhere in the hallway. Matteo, she called out softly, pushing herself up to sitting position. Is that you? No answer came. Just another creak, slower this time, as if someone was trying to move silently. Mia's heart began to race. She reached for her cane beside the bed, her fingers finding it exactly where she'd left it. The house felt different. The usual comforting warmth of Matteo's home had been replaced by something cold and unfamiliar. Standing carefully, she made her way to her bedroom door. Her bare feet registered subtle vibrations through the floor. Movement, definitely not Matteo's familiar footsteps. He always walked with purpose, never tried to mask his presence. She stepped into the hallway, one hand trailing along the wall. The morning air carried an unusual chill, and she could feel a draft that shouldn't be there. Moving cautiously forward, she followed the wall until she reached what she knew was the front door. Her fingers found the edge of the door, slightly ajar, letting in the cold mountain air. Something papery fluttered against her hand, a note taped to the handle. Her heart pounding harder now, she wished desperately she could read it, could know what threat it contained. Before she could turn back, a familiar scent hit her nostrils. Cheap cologne mixed with cigarette smoke. Her former guardian. The recognition came a split second before rough hands grabbed her arms. You've caused enough trouble. His voice hissed close to her ear. She tried to cry out, but a hand clamped over her mouth. Not a sound, or your rich friend gets hurt worse than he already is. Mia's blood ran cold at the implication. What had they done to Matteo? She struggled against the iron grip, but her guardian knew her movements too well, anticipated every attempt to break free. Stop fighting, he growled, dragging her forward. You're coming with me, nice and quiet. The pre-dawn air hit her skin as they moved outside. Gravel crunched under her bare feet, each step a small agony as she was forced toward what she could tell was a running vehicle, the low rumble of an idling engine growing louder. A sliding door scraped open. Hands roughly shoved her inside, the familiar smell of old upholstery and stale cigarettes telling her this was the van he always used. The door slammed shut, trapping her in darkness no different from her usual world, but somehow more terrifying. The engine roared to life, the sudden noise shattering the mountain quiet. Inside the lodge, the sound pierced Matteo's troubled sleep. He bolted upright, instantly alert. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones. "Mia!" he called out, already running for her room. Finding it empty, his heart began to race. "Mia!" The front door stood open, morning mist rolling in across the threshold. A piece of paper fluttered on the handle. He snatched it off, reading the words that made his blood run cold. "Back off, Ward. Forget her." He burst outside, bare feet pounding across the gravel driveway, just in time to see red tail lights disappearing into the trees. The van's engine echoed off the mountainside, growing fainter with each second. "No!" The cry tore from his throat as his legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees, gravel biting into his skin. "No, no, no!" Memories flooded back. Smoke-filled hallways, a small hand slipping from his grasp, promises broken in the chaos of that long-ago fire. He'd failed her then, and now he'd failed her again. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. He'd had security systems installed after the investigators' warnings, silent alarms that would bring help. But help was coming too late. Again. Red and blue lights painted the trees as police cars pulled into his driveway. Officers approached quickly, taking in the scene. The billionaire on his knees, the open door, the threatening note crushed in his fist. Tears streamed down Matteo's face as he looked up at them, his voice raw with emotion. "They took her," he choked out. "They took Mia." One officer knelt beside him while others began securing the scene. "We'll find her, Mr. Ward. We'll get teams out searching right away." Matteo pushed himself to his feet, wiping roughly at his eyes. The devastation in his expression hardened into determination as he looked toward the road where the van had disappeared. "I will find her," he said, his voice thick with tears but absolutely certain. "I don't care what it takes. I'm not failing her again. I will find her." The rising sun painted the mountain peaks gold, but Matteo barely noticed the beauty. His entire world had narrowed to a single purpose: finding Mia and bringing her home, no matter the cost. The morning sun climbed higher, but its warmth couldn't penetrate the chill that had settled in Matteo's bones. Police officers moved methodically through his property, marking evidence and taking photographs. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the mountain breeze, turning his peaceful sanctuary into something from a nightmare. Detective Ramirez sat across from Matteo at the dining room table, his weathered face serious as he reviewed the stack of documents spread between them. "This is excellent documentation, Mr. Ward," he said, studying the investigators' reports. "Having this background on her guardian's pattern of exploitation will help us build a solid case." Matteo nodded mechanically, his fingers drumming against the wooden table. "There's more," he said, pulling out additional files. "Financial records showing suspicious activity, records from the foster home fire, everything we've gathered about his previous victims." The detective's eyebrows rose as he scanned the papers. "This is thorough work. Your investigator doesn't miss much." "I just wish—" Matteo's voice caught. "I wish it had been enough to protect her." A gentle hand squeezed his shoulder, and he looked up to find Aunt Lorraine standing beside him. Her eyes were red-rimmed but determined as she pulled up a chair. "I came as soon as I got your call," she said softly. Without hesitation, she reached for both his hands across the table. "First things first, We need guidance." Detective Ramirez respectfully bowed his head as Lorraine began to pray, her voice strong and clear in the quiet room. "Lord, we come before you now, asking for your protection over Mia. Shield her from harm, give her courage, and help her know she's not alone. Grant Mateo and these officers the wisdom and strength they need to find her. Guide their steps, illuminate their path, and bring her safely home. In Jesus' name, amen." Something shifted in Mateo's chest as the prayer ended. The fog of despair that had clouded his thinking began to lift, replaced by renewed focus and determination. "Thank you," he whispered to his aunt, squeezing her hands before letting go. He turned to his laptop, pulling up a tracking program. "We need to try pinging her phone again." His security team had been monitoring Mia's cell signal since dawn, but it had remained frustratingly dark. As Mateo refreshed the screen for what felt like the 100th time, a small dot suddenly appeared. "There." He leaned forward, heart racing. Her phone just connected to a tower near the old Highway 50 rest stop, about 40 miles west. Detective Ramirez was immediately on his radio, coordinating with other units. "How long ago?" "Signal lasted less than a minute, but it's the first trace we've had." Mateo was already standing, grabbing his jacket. "I know that area. There's an access road that leads to some abandoned utility buildings. Perfect place to hide." "Mr. Ward." The detective's tone was cautioning. "I know you want to help, but this needs to be handled by— I'm coming." Mateo's voice left no room for argument. "This is my property we're talking about. I know every back road and trail in these mountains. You need me there." After a moment of consideration, Detective Ramirez nodded. "All right, but you stay with us and follow every instruction. Deal?" "Deal." Aunt Lorraine hugged him tightly. "I'll stay here in case there's news. Be careful, sweet boy." Within minutes, they were on the road, Mateo riding with Detective Ramirez, while his head of security, James, followed in a separate vehicle. The highway stretched before them, cutting through rugged terrain that grew increasingly remote. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the mountain passes as they wound their way west. Mateo's hands clenched in his lap, every mile feeling like an eternity. He couldn't shake the image of Mia, alone and afraid, counting on him to find her. Finally, they turned onto a narrow dirt road that led to the old rest stop. The building stood abandoned, windows boarded up, weeds pushing through cracked pavement. And there, partially hidden behind the structure, was a familiar van. "That's it," Mateo confirmed as they pulled to a stop. "That's her guardian's vehicle." Detective Ramirez radioed for backup, while officers began securing the perimeter. James joined them, his trained eye scanning the surroundings. "Tracks." The security officer pointed to faint footprints in the dusty ground. "At least 3 people, heading west toward those utility buildings." Mateo followed his gesture to where several dark structures hulked against the dimming sky about a quarter-mile away. The old buildings had once housed equipment for maintaining mountain power lines, but they'd been abandoned years ago when operations moved to a new facility. As evening colors began bleeding from the sky, painting everything in shades of purple and gray, Mateo felt a fierce resolve settle over him. Somewhere in those shadowy buildings, Mia was waiting. This time, he wouldn't fail her. With officers moving into position and his security team at the ready. Mateo took a steadying breath and began moving forward through the gathering dusk, each step bringing him closer to the darkened structures. And hopefully, to Mia. The darkness pressed in around Mia as she sat uncomfortably in the wooden chair, her wrists bound behind her with rough rope that chafed her skin. The musty air carried the steady plink, plink, plink of water dripping from somewhere above, each drop marking time in the oppressive silence. The concrete floor beneath her feet was cold and damp, and she could smell mold mixing with decades of dust. Her former guardian's footsteps echoed sharply as he paced back and forth across the room, his agitation growing with each pass. The rhythm of his movement was erratic. 3 steps. Pause, turn, 5 steps, pause, curse under his breath. "This is your fault," he spat suddenly, his voice bouncing off the empty walls. "All of it! You just had to run away, didn't you? Had to go find yourself a rich savior?" Mia kept her face carefully neutral, though her heart hammered in her chest. She focused on her breathing, trying to stay calm as she had learned to do during countless other moments of fear. In her mind, she began humming the simple melody that had comforted her since childhood, the lullaby that connected her to Matteo, to safety, to hope. "You think I wanted this?" Her guardian's voice cracked with desperation. "I took care of you for years. That settlement money is rightfully mine after everything I've done. But no, you had to complicate things by running to Matteo Ward of all people." His footsteps quickened, more frenzied now. Mia could hear the strain in his breathing, the edge of panic creeping in. She knew from experience that this was when he was most dangerous, when he felt cornered. The water continued its steady drip as minutes stretched painfully by. Mia's shoulders ached from being pulled back, and her throat was dry with thirst. Still, she kept the lullaby playing in her head, letting its familiar notes wash over her like a shield. Suddenly, she caught the sound of movement outside, multiple sets of footsteps crunching on gravel, approaching the building. Her guardian must have heard it too, because his pacing stopped abruptly. "Don't make a sound," he hissed, moving closer to her. But then a voice cut through the darkness, strong, clear, and achingly familiar. "Mia!" Matteo's call echoed through the empty doorway, filled with equal parts determination and desperation. "Mia, where are you?" Before she could respond, her guardian's hand clamped down on her arm, yanking her roughly to her feet. The chair clattered to the floor as he pulled her against him, using her as a shield. "Stay back!" he shouted, his voice shaking. "Don't come any closer!" The beam of flashlights cut through the darkness as police officers burst through the doorway, their boots thundering on the concrete floor. "Police! Let her go! Hands where we can see them!" Mia felt her guardian's grip tighten painfully for one terrifying moment before suddenly releasing. She stumbled forward as he let go, nearly falling, but strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. "I've got you!" Matteo's voice was close to her ear, thick with emotion. "You're safe now. I've got you." She collapsed against his chest, her whole body trembling uncontrollably as the adrenaline drained away. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of her guardian being handcuffed, his angry protests mixing with the official voices of the officers reading him his rights. Matteo's arms wrapped protectively around her, one hand gently stroking her hair as he murmured soft reassurances. "It's over. You're okay. I'm here." The rope around her wrists was carefully cut away, and she immediately turned to fully embrace Matteo, burying her face in his shoulder as tears began to fall. She could feel his heart racing as fast as her own, his breath uneven with relief and lingering fear. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly, his hands gentle as they checked her for injuries. "Just sore," she managed to whisper, her voice hoarse, and tired, so tired. The sound of more vehicles arriving outside filtered through the old building, and soon paramedics were making their way in, equipment rattling as they approached. "Let's get you checked out," Matteo said, keeping one arm securely around her shoulders as the medical team began their assessment. The paramedics worked efficiently but kindly, speaking each action before they touched her, respecting her need to know what was happening. As they checked her vital signs and tended to her abraded wrists, Mia kept one hand firmly gripped in Matteo's, drawing strength from his steady presence. The lullaby that had sustained her through her ordeal now played in both their hearts, no longer a melody of fear and separation, but one of reunion and safety. The warm glow of lamplight filled Matteo's living room, casting soft shadows on the walls as evening settled over the mountain lodge. Mia lay stretched out on the oversized leather sofa, wrapped in her favorite plush blanket, the one she'd come to know by its impossibly soft texture during her stay. The events of the day had left her drained, both physically and emotionally, but she was finally home. Because somehow, in the short time she'd been here, Matteo's lodge had become more of a home than any place she'd known in years. A female paramedic with gentle hands carefully applied antibiotic ointment to the angry purple bruise blooming on Mia's forearm. "This might sting a little," she warned before touching the tender skin. Mia winced slightly but remained still, grounded by the familiar pressure of Matteo's hand on her shoulder. He hadn't moved more than a few feet from her since they'd returned, as if afraid she might disappear again if he looked away. Even when the police had needed his statement, he'd insisted on giving it right there in the living room where he could keep watch over her. The heavy wooden front door creaked open, bringing with it a rush of cool mountain air and the unmistakable scent of homemade chicken soup. "Oh, my sweet children." Aunt Lorraine's voice carried across the room, thick with emotion. The sound of her practical shoes clicked rapidly across the hardwood floor as she hurried toward them, a large covered pot clutched in her oven-mitted hands. "Let me take that, Aunt Lorraine," Matteo offered, but she shooed him back to his spot beside Mia. "You stay right where you are," she instructed, setting the pot down on the coffee table. "That's where you're needed most right now." The paramedic finished securing the bandage on Mia's arm and began packing up her supplies. "Everything looks good," she assured them. "The bruising will fade in a few days, and there's no serious damage. Just try to rest and take it easy." As the medical team departed, Aunt Lorraine settled onto the edge of the sofa near Mia's feet. Her warm, weathered hand found Mia's ankle beneath the blanket and gave it a gentle squeeze. "First things first," she said firmly. "We're going to pray." Mia felt tears prick at her eyes, touched by the older woman's unwavering faith and maternal concern. She'd known Aunt Lorraine for such a short time, but the woman's genuine love and acceptance had wrapped around her like a protective embrace from the very first moment. "Dear Heavenly Father," Aunt Lorraine began, her voice steady and sure, "we come to you with hearts full of gratitude for bringing our Mia home safely. Thank you for protecting her, for giving Matteo the wisdom to find her, and for surrounding her with your divine protection even in her darkest moments." Mia felt Matteo's hand slip into hers as his aunt continued to pray. His thumb traced soothing circles on her palm, and she squeezed his fingers in response. "Lord, we ask for your continued healing, both for her body and her spirit. Help her to feel your peace that passes all understanding. Wrap her in your love and help her to know that she is precious, she is valued, and she is never alone. In Jesus' name, amen." "Amen," Mia whispered, her voice catching slightly. "Now then," Aunt Lorraine declared, rising to her feet. "Let's get some of this soup into you. Nothing heals the soul quite like homemade chicken soup." As Aunt Lorraine bustled into the kitchen for bowls and spoons, Mia turned her face toward Matteo. "I was so scared," she admitted quietly. "Not just of him, but I was afraid you wouldn't find me. That I'd end up alone again, like after the fire." The sofa dipped as Matteo moved closer, taking both her hands in his. His voice was thick with emotion when he spoke. "Listen to me, Mia. I will always come back for you. Always. You've mattered to me since we were kids, even if I didn't remember it clearly until now. You matter to me even more today." He cupped her hands between his own, his touch infinitely gentle. "You're not alone anymore. You never will. Be again. I promise you that." Mia felt the truth of his words settle deep in her heart, chasing away the lingering shadows of fear and doubt. The day's exhaustion began to wash over her in waves as the tension finally released from her body. Aunt Lorraine returned with steaming bowls of soup, but Mia found herself struggling to keep her eyes open, even as the rich, comforting aroma filled the air. "It's okay, sweetheart," Aunt Lorraine soothed, setting the bowls aside. "The soup will keep. You just rest now." Mia settled deeper into the soft cushions, letting the familiar sounds of the lodge wrap around her. The gentle pop and crackle of the fireplace, the quiet murmur of Matteo and his aunt's voices, the distant whisper of wind in the pines outside. The blanket was warm, and she felt safe, truly safe, for the first time in as long as she could remember. As sleep began to claim her, she was distantly aware of Matteo settling into the armchair next to the sofa. He began to hum their childhood lullaby, the sweet, simple melody following her down into peaceful dreams. She knew without doubt that he would be there watching over her, keeping her safe through the night, just as he had promised to do all those years ago. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting its warming light over the peaceful scene. Mia sleeping soundly on the sofa, Matteo maintaining his protective vigil from the armchair, and Aunt Lorraine quietly tidying the kitchen, her gentle humming harmonizing with the melody of love and protection that filled the mountain lodge. Golden morning light filtered through the windows of Matteo's mountain lodge, painting warm patterns across Mia's face as she slowly awakened. The familiar scents of butter, maple syrup, and fresh coffee drifted through the air, accompanied by the quiet clinking of cookware from the kitchen. She took a deep breath, letting the peaceful morning wrap around her like a gentle embrace. The events of yesterday felt distant now, like a fading nightmare chased away by dawn. Here in the safety of the lodge, surrounded by warmth and care, Mia felt her strength returning. She carefully sat up on the sofa where she'd spent the night, orienting herself to the space around her. "Good morning," Matteo called softly from the kitchen. "I hope you're hungry. I'm making my specialty. Blueberry pancakes?" Mia smiled, reaching for her cane that Matteo had thoughtfully placed within easy reach. "It smells wonderful," she replied, carefully making her way toward his voice. Her movements were slower than usual, her body still tender from yesterday's ordeal, but she was determined to maintain her independence. Matteo resisted the urge to rush over and help, knowing how important it was for her to navigate on her own. Instead, he continued cooking, letting the sound of his movements guide her. "The counter is about 3 steps ahead of you," he said quietly when she drew near. "There's a bar stool just to your left." Mia found the seat easily, settling onto it with a soft sigh of relief. "Thank you," she said, and they both knew she meant more than just the guidance to the chair. "Coffee?" Matteo asked, already reaching for a mug he'd set aside for her. "It's the hazelnut blend you liked yesterday." "Please." She wrapped her hands around the warm mug when he placed it carefully in her reach, letting the aroma and heat soothe her. "I can't remember the last time someone cooked breakfast for me." Matteo paused in flipping a pancake, his heart aching at the simple statement. "Well, get used to it," he said lightly, though his words carried weight. "I may not be a master chef, but breakfast I can handle." As they shared the meal, Matteo carefully broached the subject of their next steps. "I spoke with my lawyer early this morning," he said, sliding another pancake onto her plate. "She's coming by this afternoon to help finalize some paperwork. We're going to make sure you're legally protected from any future attempts at exploitation." Mia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "The settlement they mentioned from the fire. I never knew about it." "I know," Matteo said gently. "Your guardian kept that information from you deliberately. But that ends now. You'll have full control over your own finances and decisions. I promise you that." Tears welled in Mia's eyes, but she blinked them back. It's overwhelming, she admitted. Having choices again. Having control. We'll take it one step at a time. Matteo assured her. You're not alone in this anymore. The rest of the morning passed quietly as they prepared for the afternoon meeting. Matteo worked remotely from his home office while Mia rested, her body and mind still recovering from yesterday's trauma. Around 2:00, the lawyer arrived. A sharp, efficient woman named Sarah Martinez, who immediately put Mia at ease with her clear explanations and patient approach. Everything is in order, Sarah said after nearly 2 hours of reviewing and signing documents. We've filed for an emergency protection order against your former guardian, and the paperwork to restore your financial independence is being processed. The settlement fund from the fire will be transferred to an account only you can access. Mia's fingers traced over the papers she'd just signed, her expression a mixture of relief and disbelief. I never thought I'd be free of him, she said softly. After Sarah left, Mia felt the need for fresh air and sunshine. She made her way carefully to the back deck, her cane tapping gently against the wooden boards. The late afternoon sun warmed her face as she found the railing, grounding herself in the peaceful moment. She heard Matteo's footsteps behind her, approaching slowly. Without hesitation, she reached out for his arm, finding it exactly where she knew it would be. Thank you, she said simply, her voice thick with emotion. For everything. For finding me. Both times. For helping me reclaim my life. For believing in me. Matteo covered her hand with his own where it rested on his arm. You know, he said thoughtfully, I've achieved so much in my life, built a successful company, made more money than I could ever spend, but I've been empty, isolated, hidden away in this mountain lodge, going through the motions. He turned to face her, though she couldn't see his expression. Finding you again, helping you, it's brought light back into my life. It feels like a miracle, like something I didn't even know I was missing suddenly made everything make sense again. They stood together in comfortable silence as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Though Mia couldn't see the sunset, she could feel its warmth on her face and sense its beauty in the peaceful stillness that settled over the mountain. Their shared presence spoke volumes more than words could express, their bond deepening in the quiet moment they shared. The mountain spring had melted into a glorious summer, bringing with it transformations both outside and within Matteo Ward's lodge. Sunlight streamed through the panoramic windows, illuminating the living room, where Mia sat cross-legged on the floor, her hands buried in the soft golden fur of Harper, her new service dog. The gentle retriever had arrived 3 weeks ago, and already their bond was unshakable. Good boy, Harper, Mia praised softly as the dog settled into a perfect heel position beside her. Her fingers found his harness handle with practiced ease, the leather warm and familiar under her touch. Harper's presence had given her a newfound confidence in navigating spaces both familiar and unknown. Matteo watched from the kitchen island, a warm smile playing across his features as he observed their morning routine. The past few months had brought so many changes, all of them positive. The house no longer felt empty or haunted by his past solitude. Instead, it buzzed with life, purpose, and the occasional bark from Harper. Your next training session is at 10 o'clock, Matteo reminded her, checking his watch. Would you like me to drive you, or are you feeling up to walking with Harper? Mia's face lit up with determination. We'll walk. Harper and I have been practicing the route to the training center, haven't we, boy? The dog's tail thumped against the hardwood floor in response. The transformation in Mia over the past months had been remarkable. Her settlement money had been secured, her former guardian was facing criminal charges, and she had begun building an independent life filled with possibility. She moved through the house with increasing confidence, her cane now supplemented by Harper's careful guidance. Aunt Lorraine's van pulled into the driveway just as Mia and Harper were preparing to leave for training. The older woman bustled in, arms laden with covered dishes that filled the air with mouth-watering aromas. "I've brought enough lasagna to feed an army," Lorraine announced, setting her burdens on the counter. "And don't you dare tell me it's too much, Mateo Ward. A growing foundation needs well-fed workers." The Foundation for Empowered Living, Mateo's newest venture inspired by Mia, had launched 2 months ago. Its mission was simple but powerful: protecting and supporting women with disabilities who faced abuse or exploitation. Already they'd helped 3 women escape dangerous situations and find safe housing. "The Foundation's first fundraiser is next week," Mateo shared, helping his aunt unpack the food. "We're expecting over 200 guests." 250, actually. Mia corrected with a smile. "I just got off the phone with the event coordinator. Word is spreading fast." Lorraine paused in her kitchen, organizing to pull Mia into a warm hug. "The Lord works in mysterious and wonderful ways," she said softly. "Look how far you've come, child, and look at the good that's growing from it." After some gentle fussing and promises to return for dinner, Lorraine saw Mia and Harper off for their training session. She turned to Mateo once they'd gone, her eyes twinkling. "That girl has brought such light to this house. To you, too, nephew." Mateo couldn't disagree. The month since finding Mia again had changed him profoundly. His former isolation had given way to purpose, and the empty rooms of his mountain retreat now echoed with conversation and laughter. The day passed quickly, filled with foundation work and preparation for the upcoming fundraiser. As late afternoon approached, Mateo suggested an evening walk along the Ridge Trail, one of their favorite activities since Harper had joined their family. The sun hung low in the sky as they set out, casting everything in warm, golden light. Harper led Mia confidently along the well-maintained path, while Mateo walked beside them, occasionally describing the spectacular view of the valleys below. "The aspens are starting to get their fall colors," he noted, watching how the breeze stirred the leaves, just hints of yellow at the edges. Mia smiled, face tilted toward the warmth of the setting sun. "I can smell it in the air, that first touch of autumn. The way the afternoons feel a little shorter, a little cooler." They paused at their favorite spot along the ridge, where a wooden bench offered a place to rest and take in the panoramic vista. Harper settled at Mia's feet as they sat together, comfortable in the peaceful moment. "Mateo Ward," Mia whispered suddenly, turning her face toward him. The way she said his name, just as she had that first day at the community center, still sent a shiver of recognition through him. "Yes?" he answered softly, taking her hand in his. "I never thought I'd find peace like this," she admitted. "After losing my sight, after all those years of feeling trapped and alone, I'd stopped believing it was possible." Mateo squeezed her hand gently. "You'll never face darkness alone again," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold as they held each other close, Harper a steady presence at their feet. In that moment, Mateo marveled at how finding Mia again had not only helped her heal, but had brought him out of his own shadows. Their lives had become beautifully intertwined, bound together by hope, healing, and an unshakable faith in new beginnings. As the golden light faded into dusk, they remained embraced on the mountain ridge, 2 souls who had found their way through darkness to light, their hearts beating in quiet synchronicity as the day drew to a close. The crisp mountain morning air held whispers of early spring, carrying the sweet scent of melting snow and awakening earth through the slightly opened kitchen window. Inside Mateo's lodge, sunlight streamed across the hardwood floors, creating warm patches that Harper, Mia's faithful service dog, contentedly lounged in while keeping a watchful eye on his handler. Mia sat at the large wooden kitchen table, her fingers wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. The rich aroma filled her senses as she listened to the familiar sound of Matteo's footsteps moving around the kitchen. He'd developed a habit of narrating his movements, not because she needed it, but because he knew she enjoyed tracking his presence through sound. "Just grabbing the foundation pamphlets," he announced, settling into the chair beside her. Paper rustled as he organized the materials. "Ready to review the launch details?" Mia nodded, turning her face toward his voice with a smile. "Read it all to me. I want to make sure everything's perfect." Harper shifted at her feet, his warm presence a constant comfort, as Matteo began reading the carefully crafted words that would introduce their new outreach center to the community. "The Foundation for Empowered Living presents its first community outreach center," Matteo began, his voice carrying the quiet pride they both felt. "Located in the heart of downtown, our center offers comprehensive support services for women with disabilities facing challenging circumstances." Mia leaned forward slightly, absorbing every word. The pamphlet detailed their mission, providing safe, accessible housing options, counseling services, job training programs, and legal advocacy. Each element had been thoughtfully designed based on Mia's own experiences and the gaps she'd identified in the system. "Our accessible housing units feature state-of-the-art accommodations," Matteo continued, "including smart home technology, barrier-free design, and 24-hour security systems." He paused, reaching for Mia's hand. "We're starting with 10 units, but there's room to expand as needed." 10 lives changed, Mia murmured, squeezing his fingers. 10 women who won't have to feel trapped or alone like I did. They spent the morning reviewing every detail of the launch event, from the accessibility features of the venue to the carefully chosen speakers who would share their own stories of survival and triumph. Harper dozed peacefully under the table, occasionally lifting his head to check on Mia or accept a gentle pat. After sharing a quiet lunch of homemade soup and fresh bread, Matteo suggested a drive into town. The afternoon sun had warmed the early spring air, making it perfect weather for an outing. Harper guided Mia confidently to the car, settling in the back seat as Matteo helped Mia into the passenger side. As they drove down the winding mountain road, Mia could feel the subtle changes in temperature and air pressure that signaled their descent into the valley. The town had become familiar territory over the past months, but today felt different, more purposeful. "We're passing the community center," Matteo said softly as they approached the building where their story had begun. "Can we stop?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'd like to stand there for a moment." Matteo pulled into the parking lot, helping Mia out while Harper waited patiently by their side. Together, they walked to the entrance of the building where, months ago, Matteo had bid $1 to stop a humiliating spectacle and unknowingly reunited with a piece of his past. Mia stood quietly, one hand on Harper's harness, the other held securely in Matteo's grasp. The spring breeze played with her hair as she took deep, steady breaths, letting the memories wash over her, not with the fear and shame that had once colored them, but with profound gratitude for how that moment had transformed her life. "I was so scared that day," she admitted softly. "But something in me recognized your voice, your presence. Even before I knew for sure it was you, I felt safe." Matteo drew her closer, his voice thick with emotion. "I had no idea that $1 would change everything, that finding you again would bring so much meaning back into my life." They stood there for several minutes, letting the significance of the place settle around them, like a gentle blessing. Harper remained steadfast beside them, his presence a symbol of the independence and security Mia had found. As the afternoon began to fade, they drove home to the mountain lodge that had become their sanctuary. The familiar scent of pine and wood smoke welcomed them as they settled in the living room, where Matteo had already laid a fire to ward off the evening chill. Sitting close together on the comfortable sofa, they talked quietly about their hopes for the foundation, their dreams for helping others find their way out of darkness. Harper lay at their feet, occasionally raising his head to rest it on their knees, bringing smiles to both their faces. "Did you ever imagine," Mia asked, her fingers intertwined with Matteo's, "that something so beautiful could come from such difficult beginnings?" "No," Matteo answered honestly, drawing her closer. "I never expected to find love again, let alone purpose like this. You've helped me see that sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most meaningful destinations." As the fire crackled softly in the hearth, Harper rose and gently nudged their clasped hands with his nose, as if offering his own seal of approval. Mia laughed softly, the sound mixing with the peaceful crackling of the flames, a perfect harmony of joy, safety, and belonging. The room held them in its warm embrace as day settled into evening, three souls bound together by circumstance, choice, and love. In the quiet moments between words, they could feel the rightness of it all, the perfect alignment of past and present, challenge and triumph, darkness and light, creating a future neither had dared to imagine before finding each other again. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe. And tomorrow, I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.